AS score reading, Haydn Symphony No. 101, third movement. Hi folks, okay, so here is a score. This is what the conductor would be using to read all the different parts of the orchestra. Each individual player and performer, like we have two flutes in this orchestra, each of the flautists would have their own separate line. We can see actually, looking at the flute parts, that we've got two flutes, and at the top above their stave it says A2. That means both flute players are going to be playing exactly what the music says in front of them, so they're going to be doubling that part, so they're both going to be playing that part. Then we can see here at this stage, that the first flute then plays this section of the music, because we've got rests underneath on the score here for the conductor to see that the second flute stops playing at that particular moment in time. Two oboes, they're the same at the very beginning. They're both playing. We can tell this. It doesn't have A2 written down there, but we can tell that there's two oboes because on that first note, which is an A, we've got a tail up and a tail down. So the tail up referring to the principal oboist and the tail down to the second oboe. And then the music splits into harmonies. So the first oboist plays the D and the F sharp. Remember our key signature here. The F sharp is played by the second oboist. The same applies for the clarinets, both of them are playing. And here A2 is written above the bassoon part, saying we've got two bassoonists and our bassoons will be playing the same pitched notes as we had for the flutes at the beginning. And then we've got our horns in D, transposing instrument in D, and they are divisi here, so they're divided. Principal horn playing the upper pitched note and second horn playing the lower pitched. And trombone, don't get this confused, it's not trombones, it's trumpets. The trumpets, two of them again, they're transposing and they're in D, and they're doing exactly the same as what the horns are doing above. Notice that the horns are always on a score higher than the trumpets, because the sound and the timbre of a horn is a very good blending brass sound between the difference between woodwind instruments and then brass instruments. So always the horn is placed above trumpet. Going down our score, we've then got a timpani player. The timpanist is having two drums or pans. One drum is tuned to the note D, which is the tonic note of our key signature, which is D major, and tuned to the note A, which is the fifth note in the scale of D major, which is our dominant. So tonic, dominant, very typical of the classical period, where of course Haydn was a huge sort of composer in the classical period, and they would normally have their timpani tuned to tonic and dominant. We go down and we look now. We've got the string section. First violins, second violins, viola. Note that the viola is in the alto clef here, and we've got, typical of classical symphony orchestra composition, we've got our cellos and our double basses playing together on the bottom stave in the bass clef. Let's go and have a little look at what else we've got here. We've got the tempo marking, which says allegretto. Allegretto is moderately fast, not as fast as allegro, which would be very fast, and we know that this is the third movement and it's a minuet or a minuetto. In a classical symphony, we would expect to have four movements. Originally there would have been three, a fast movement, then a slow movement, and then a very fast movement. It then developed a little bit further and they extended that form, and they added then four movements. We have a fast first movement, slow second, and then typically a minuet and trio, and this is the minuetto, and then we'd finish off with a very fast fourth movement to finish off with. So minuetto, forerunner of our what we call a waltz. Waltz is in 3 beats in a bar, minuets are in 3 beats in a bar. It's typical, it's a dance movement because they would have been dancing to minuets. So we've got 3 crotchet beats, 3/4, 3 beats to a bar. Let's have a little look. Haydn was, as I said, he was called sometimes the father of the symphony orchestra, or the symphony, and this is his Symphony number 101. It's the 9th one from his London symphonies, of which he wrote 12. He wrote this in roughly about 1793 on his second visit to London. And it was called the Clock Symphony because in the second movement there's this sort of ticking clock that runs throughout the movement. Let's have a little listen to the second movement. Okay, so I'll stop it there. So you get the idea of that ticking clock. Let's have a little listen to the very opening of this.
Question 4. You will hear an excerpt from the third movement of Haydn's Symphony number 101. The music will be played twice, with a pause between the playings. Here is the music for the first time.
Okay, that's all I'm going to play of the beginning, so I'll just close that down. And the music just finished off just down here. Right, this is interesting. So notice that in our score, at the very beginning, we have these are the instruments of the orchestra, typical double woodwind orchestra. Double woodwind because there's 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons. They're all sort of playing along until we get to here, and then you can see that we've got these 2 sort of parallel tram lines going on, which tells us that we've got to move down our score and look at the next kind of chunk. So here, note now we don't have the instruments written down, so we've got to remember them. So cellos, double bass, violas, second violin, first violin, timpani, then it was trumpets, then it's horns, then it's bassoon, clarinet, oboe, and then flute. So we have to remember what the instruments are on each of the staves. And the music I stopped here at beat 1, bar 8. Now I know it's bar 8 because here it says we're on bar 10. So I just counted backwards, obviously, and that's bar 8. So we just heard the first 8 bars. Typically classical, because we've got 8 bars, which is a balanced number, of which we've got a 4-bar phrase, 1, 2, 3, 4, followed by its answer phrase, 1, 2, 3, and then down to here is 4. So we've got our antecedent and our consequent phrase. So typically balanced phrasing, which you would expect in classical music of this type. Notice that the piece of music, although it says 3 beats in the bar, the very first, what looks like the first bar, is not a complete bar because we only have 1 crotchet beat in it. This is called an anacrusis or an upbeat. We can't call this bar 1, but we must call this bar 1. So bar 1 beat 1, bar 1 beat 2, beat 3. I'm going to leave it there for now, and I'm going to do a second video and then go on to explain a bit more. Bye for now.